Hello and welcome to Bird Barrier. My name is Michael Gallion, and today we are covering woodpeckers as part of our specific bird species webcast series. We've got 6 of these that are specific to birds that are common bird control issues. You know, these are the birds that matter the most. Woodpeckers are one of the quirky ones. We're doing another one later after this today on mud swallows. These are 2 of the most really unique birds. They have their own set of guidelines, and hopefully this will be helpful, especially for those of you out there that are going to solve these type of bird problems. Before we get started, there's one favor I want to ask for the group that's out there. I want to know how many people here have either dealt with woodpeckers, have an opportunity to do jobs for woodpeckers in the future. I'm just curious of what kind, you know, if we're getting people that are specifically joining these because they have jobs or have done jobs even related, or otherwise if you've none, yeah, like somebody put none, that's good to know, you know.
Someone raised their finger.
Okay. And then I see Matt says he does woodpecker work from time to time, done a few. And of course, depending on where you are, there are a lot of different species of woodpeckers, the birds that actually create this sort of damage either through boring holes in structures or doing the drumming or storage of food. Those are the main sort of issues that we run into. So hopefully this will be helpful. Now, if you're just tuning in on woodpeckers and you missed the yesterday's 2 that we did on pigeons and gulls, we want you to know that you can get a certificate for all 6 of these. We're going to do a special certificate that shows that you went through all 6 of these. If you missed any of them, they are going to be available on our Facebook page called Bird Barrier Live Training. And if you are out there and you haven't joined that group, you have to ask for permission. It's a private group, so just go to that.
Have a Facebook, email me.
Yeah, if you don't have a Facebook page, you can also email Zach. Let's put your email up there, Zach. Zach's our producer on the shows, and he's the one who handles all the certificate or any kind of the administrative things that arise for these classes, getting you on other classes as well. So we got a whole bunch of more certification classes coming. And then also these videos that are bird specific, of course, are going to be on our YouTube page. So they'll be up there for a long time for you to review. And if you're getting ready to go out and do a specific job to a bird, then go out there. But as far as woodpeckers, let's get started with this one here. Some basics about the birds. Obviously, they have a very sharp bill. All of these birds are going to have an extended bill for boring holes and getting into the tough surfaces. I don't think anybody has too much trouble identifying these birds. Let's watch a quick video that's going to give you some actual insight into the basic behaviors of woodpeckers.
Today on Animal Fact Files, we're learning about pileated woodpeckers. Peck on that subscribe button for channel updates. Thanks to Tashara Wilson for today's request. Pileated woodpeckers are found in North America, and they are some of the biggest woodpeckers living in that region. These hefty flyers are nearly the size of a crow, and can have more than 2-foot wingspans. They can be identified by their bright red crests, striped heads, black bodies, and bright white wing undersides, as well as their monkey-like chattering, though they leave telltale signs that they visited an area too. Per their namesake, pileated woodpeckers drum away at trees looking for grubs hiding within the bark. Pileated woodpeckers seem to have a strong preference for carpenter ants, which they can lick up with their long, sticky tongue. But these birds will also take beetle larvae, termites, caterpillars, cockroaches, and even fruits and nuts. Most of these foods are found through excavating holes, usually in dead and downed trees. Though pileated woodpeckers will also look for food in live trees and, you know, rain gutters. Thankfully, pileated woodpeckers come equipped with reinforced necks and skulls that allow them to drum away without causing injury. Because their food is usually found in woody environments, pileated woodpeckers prefer to live in older forests with rotting logs littering the ground, though they're highly adaptable birds. Some people think the fallen trees pileated woodpeckers love are an eyesore, but to these birds, they're a banquet. These birds also excavate large cavities for their nests. Pileated woodpeckers don't generally migrate, and usually have an established territory they will maintain with their mate. Pileated woodpeckers are considered monogamous, and won't typically seek a new partner unless a previous partner has died. Heck, most of the time, they don't even let other pileated woodpeckers into their territory. They'll drive off any would-be invaders with loud squawks, wing beatings, and harsh pecks. They will, however, tolerate their own young for a period of time. Pileated woodpeckers construct a nest by creating a cavity in a tree. They almost always make a new nest each year, or even within the same season if their first nesting attempt fails. This leaves their previous year's nests to the benefit of other animals such as squirrels, owls, bats, and other woodpeckers who use the holes for finding food and nesting themselves. For the pileated woodpeckers, the current year's nest is dug out and usually not lined with any extra fashionings, such as twigs or leaves. The female will lay 4 white eggs, and both the parents will incubate them, with the male specifically keeping them cozy at night. It takes just over 2 weeks for the eggs to hatch, and the chicks will leave the nest within a month. They'll hang out for a little while longer before flying off to find their own neck of the woods, usually ready to produce their own nest within a year if they can find a mate. Young pileated woodpeckers may be taken by nest invaders, such as martins and weasels, and adult pileated woodpeckers have to be careful of hawks and eagles. If they can avoid these predators, they may live to be more than 10 years old. For more facts on pileated woodpeckers, check out the links in the description. Give a thumbs up if you learned something.
One interesting thing about woodpeckers is their ability to drill into surfaces. You can imagine the amount of impact of the beak hitting a tree, the such solid material. Of course, they're testing a lot of it. They're not going to go into an oak tree, or something that's so severe. It's rare for them to really penetrate into a tree that's not already somewhat soft. But there is a huge impact to the bird. And the secret isn't so much about the bone density of their skull, but more about the design, the anatomy of the internal structure of their skull and how it protects the brain from concussion. And as a matter of fact, as you know, many inventions for humans come from nature, and this is one of the areas that they've been able to study and protect human brains with, like football helmets and things like that, from the science that comes from these birds. One of the things that I learned early on is that woodpeckers create very motivated customers. Now, what I mean by that is the wear and tear on the human, the victim, I guess you would say, especially if it's a home of woodpeckers, not just the physical damage of the structures and all this, but also the noise. And so these customers are very motivated. So don't assume that a customer is not going to pay very much for a woodpecker treatment. I learned that right away. As a matter of fact, the only time I've ever been hugged by a customer that was so happy with the solution was after a woodpecker treatment where we used optical gel, and the customer, a week later said he had slept through the night for the first time in 3 years. And it was here in California where woodpeckers just are there all year round. So these people can be very motivated and they want a professional solution. Keep in mind, these birds are protected. They're not what I would say very protected, like the next bird we're going to talk about later is the mud swallow. But you can get yourself in a lot of trouble when you start messing with woodpeckers and interfering with them in any way. So you can't touch their eggs. You don't want to harass the bird directly. You have to be very careful. If there are offspring, let them fledge the cavity before you start doing any kind of treatment to that particular hole. Now, there could be multiple cavities that have already vacated, and it's definitely a good idea to start treating those that are vacated. But if you see eggs or chicks in that hole, don't mess with those until they fledge. The damage to the structures is very real, and a trend that we see in construction all across the country is this sort of foam material that's used to beautify the exterior of homes. Man, I tell you, woodpeckers have figured this one out, and it's made of like styrofoam material. And once they get inside of these chambers, they're very well insulated. You could not create a better structure than these foam moldings that are everywhere with stucco. You know, it's the equivalent of the solar panel for pigeons. This material, especially in Arizona, the Southwest US, we're seeing all kinds of problems with it. The damage can lead to secondary issues, especially in areas that are warm, dry areas like the Southwest US. We see bees move in after the, the chicks fledge out of these woodpecker holes between their breeding cycles. Also, you get all kinds of termite damage and all kinds of secondary issues. Don't underestimate drumming as a damaging effect. What I mean, damaging on the psyche of the victim, the people around it. They go crazy after a certain amount of time. They cannot stand the sound of drumming. Now, drumming occurs, it's usually related to the mating of the birds and how they attract a mate. Now, just from drilling into their normal cavities in a tree to make a nest will make plenty of noise. But what these birds figure out is if they can go nearby to where they've prepped their nest and they find a much more acoustically amplified surface to drum on, they will just use it for sound. They won't have the intent to bore through that surface. They will bang on metal chimneys, right? How common that is. Why are they banging on the metal chimney? Are they trying to, make a nest? No. This is drumming activity to attract a mate, and it can be very damaging to the victim, the human victim on that side of things. Sometimes they'll store food. And how about this one? Here's a good tip on these birds. It's very normal to go in and remove the food and then get to the business of patching it. If you throw that food on the ground below, which is a common mistake, you're going to create another problem. They're going to want to store that food that's on the ground. So if you're seeing a situation where they're storing acorns, remove all the acorns, throw them away, keep control of all that debris when you go to treat those. That's another common reason why they'll be doing damage. These birds have one of the strongest reclaim instincts of any bird, in that they leave after they vacate and they'll come back for a second breeding season. And even if you patch over, like this particular structure, look at all the previous patching that had occurred on this particular structure. As soon as they break through again into the surface, they do recognize that this is their particular pheromone imprint to that area, and they'll keep coming back. That's really important as part of the treatment. You consider that part of the imprint. The imprinting occurs when the birds really become residents of that area. They transition into a resident, and this becomes their number one place where they want to either have a home or storage. So that's how they do that, okay? There's up to 10 offspring per nesting cavity. So these birds can really reproduce at a high rate and create a lot of problems. The offspring will fledge between 24 and 31 days. Basically a month later, these are going to fledge. And at that point, you can begin treating those areas. The males do most of the work for most of the species. They'll build the nest. They then want to attract a mate who then enters that nesting area. The male will raise the young and feed them and do all of this extra work. And so there's a lot of motivation on that male who's very aggressive territorially. So that will affect the way that you want to treat these areas. You don't really want to be trapping woodpeckers. They're protected, but it's not an effective way. So don't even think about trapping these. The real way that we solve woodpeckers is not by harming the bird in any way, but through motivation, encouragement, and deterring exclusion. We get them to go somewhere else and start a whole new nesting colony somewhere else. With multiple other woodpeckers is usually the case. But we want to prevent them from having any draw back into that space. And we also want to encourage them to go somewhere else and pick up on their reproduction off-site somewhere else. In order to really know what to do to solve these, the strategy checklist is similar to the others. We want to know, are they nesting or sounding? We would say High pressure is when they are nesting, although you can venture into high pressure areas that don't have nesting if it's just sounding. But make sure we know, I mean, if we're hearing a lot of noise on the building, but we aren't seeing any nesting cavities, then we know that it's probably more of a medium pressure. It's easier to treat when there's not high pressure nesting. And there definitely can be multiple pressures on one house. There could be one particular corner that they use for nesting and one other corner that looks identical, but they're using it for sounding. Maybe the siding wasn't attached as well to that side of the building, or maybe over time it's come loose and it produces a lot more amplification of sound. That's the kind of thing you have to really pay attention to. And mostly the customer will tell you those kind of things. They'll have a pretty good understanding of what's going on because they've been dealing with it so long. Get some good photos, take some measurements, and then, of course, the Google address, because especially on woodpeckers, we often first look at what are the exclusion factors. If we're going to get them off of this house, what is surrounding that house that will replicate the same draw so that they'll move off? If it's a cabin by itself and they're really attacking just the cabin, they've already given up on just using trees. They want to have some other structure. And therefore, you have to be a lot more aggressive in your treatment. You're going to have to spend a lot more time, energy, and materials to get those woodpeckers to vacate that particular structure. Let's talk about the deterrents that can be used for woodpeckers. I'm just going to go through a few of these, but I'm also going to go a little bit more with one of the deterrents that has really changed woodpeckers. First of all, that would be optical gel. Now we're going to talk about the use of optical gel on woodpeckers a little bit more in a minute. There are specific diagrams you can get off of our website that you should download. I keep this on my phone and I share it all the time with text when I'm out in the field. But the other thing is the Intimidator. So there's a combination of using optical gel and Intimidator. This thing was brought to our attention a few years ago, and it really can be an effective tool in getting woodpeckers to go away. They really react to the reflection. The specific shape of the reflection on the house can be a great deterrent. Of course, PVC mesh on some areas is going to be required because no matter how well you protect the wood, these birds can be very tenacious and they need a metal structure that they have to face in order to keep them out. So PVC mesh, flex track sometimes can be the right thing to use. Again, we have to see photos to know for sure, and so do a good job of keeping track of what's going on with that structure. But sometimes flex track can be a good one, as well as stealth net. Stealth net is the pillar of bird control, and given the right situation, it may make sense to create a net that doesn't allow the bird to even reach the structure in between. And it just depends on how far gone the problem really is.
Use the 3/4 inch net or what size net?
Yeah, when it comes to the netting itself, of course, you have to use the 3/4 inch net. You want to keep them as restricted as possible, and it has to be the high density net in order for it to work. It's rare that you'll actually have enough of a problem that warrants the kind of investment that stealth net can come into. It has to be a pretty big building or maybe a very specific structure where netting is proven to be the most economical way to do this. Now, before we show this part of this video, one other thing that I've been doing is shorter versions of these bird specific, and we'll actually have more 5 things on other birds. And these are good little videos, 2 or 3 minutes long, that cover 5 of the main bullet points of each bird. Those are available also in Bird Barrier Live Training. They're going to be on YouTube. It's a whole series of 5 things that we're doing. Nice short little economical pieces of information. And so keep an eye out for those and use those as refreshers. Now, one of the 5 things of woodpeckers that we cover in this video is about using deterrence. So I'm going to show you this little section that was recorded that shows you how to use optical gel and the Intimidator to solve these problems. Let's watch this video. Leads us to number 5. The solutions available. I'm going to actually show you a couple quick tips on solving these. I have here an example that we use for training on the woodpecker problems. Up here in the upper left here, we see a classic example of the hole, and then they get inside here. Once they have abandoned the site, you do remove all the nesting material to the best of your ability to get everything out of there. You'll actually treat the inside of this area with a chemical to get rid of the pheromones. And then a very simple way to prevent them from continuing use is our optical gel. It's a high pressure multisensory deterrent. This is the only one that can be used for nesting problems. This will prevent birds from going back in there, and then once this treatment has been done, eventually the birds are going to leave and you can do your repair to the structure. Another problem we see over here is they will sometimes store acorns. That's sometimes the holes that they're creating. They'll store acorns and different food in there. So you want to remove all that food source. And again, you can use this optical gel around the damaged area and prevent the birds from using this area anymore. You're going to pre-treat it chemically in the same way. On the drumming that I mentioned, you just simply space these in a pattern roughly about 10 inches apart over the drumming area, and they will stay away. And once you've reduced that activity, one other device that can be used is the Intimidator. This gets mounted onto the house itself. And if you look at it here, you get the idea. This is going to hang outside the house. It spins in the wind, but the flashes will reduce the amount of airspace for these type of birds from returning to the structures. So there you go. 5 basic points that you need to know about woodpeckers. To become an installer for... Okay, so there's some good information about how to solve using optical gel and the Intimidator. I can tell you that there is good money to be made, good value to the end customer when you use optical gel if you do it the right strategy. You know, I've seen companies, there's one company I know of in upstate New York that grabbed the opportunity when it first came out with optical gel to create just a woodpecker business. And there are a lot of cabins and places upstate there that wanted specific woodpecker problem. There's so many around the area, and he's done very well. I mean, great examples of jobs that they've sent us over the years. That covers the basics of the woodpecker, and hopefully this basic biology that we covered will help you understand them a little bit better. We've got about 3 or 4 minutes left for Q&A. If you have questions about anything that we discussed here, or have questions about jobs that you might be dealing with in the future, type into the chat box if you can, and I'll be glad to answer your questions. Otherwise, what we'll do here in a few minutes, we're going to take a break. We'll take about 2 or 3 minutes, and then right at half past the hour, we start our next presentation on mud swallows. If you only signed up for woodpeckers, but you're interested in staying, of course, just stay on live here, and you can go ahead and watch that as well. All right, so we have a question. Can you buy this gel in Canada? Yes. Last year, we finally got it approved with the PMRA. We have a different name for the product in Canada. It's called Optica, and it's a slight variation based on laws that we had, and it's available through the distributors up there in Canada. And we already know that they're using it and having great results. Yeah, here's an example that Zach gave me here of that box. So the Canadian version of optical gel is fully available. Here's another question. Have the optical gel treatments deterred long enough that they moved on and it was no longer required? Yeah, that's a great question and a great point about this product. One of the great things that we've learned about this product, not only for woodpeckers, but mud swallows, which we're going to talk about next, and all the birds. Really fascinating thing that I discovered, and this is partly through studies with Cornell. Now, my studies for ornithology and the different things that I present, a lot of it comes from Cornell. Now, Cornell University has an online ornithology program. If you're interested, it's well worth the money if you're in bird control and want to study this. But one of the interesting things about these discs is once you interfere, okay, you want to interfere with their reclaiming of their nesting. Optical gel will do a great job of that. When the birds come back and they're deterred from that spot, they'll move to another place, right? And this is pivotal to all birds. They have to find a new opportunity to nest again. If their second reproductive attempt after the first one is not successful, they will abandon that area. Not just woodpeckers. We've seen this with many birds, and it makes total sense now that I've studied the science, because these birds, their survival depends on their reproduction. They have to have a good place to go to. And so usually it's only after what we call a second movement, right? So they've come in, they have a site, you get them to relocate to a second place. Let's say they move to another part of that house. Sometimes that does happen. This is part of the woodpecker program. And if you have an opportunity to take our optical gel training, we talk a lot more in that particular module about the business models. Actually, you sell it into a payment program. So usually when you do a woodpecker treatment, there's an initial treatment and usually a 90-day period. So for the next 3 months, they do supplemental treatments. If the birds move to a second place on that property, you do another treatment, they abandon the entire structure permanently. We've seen now we have sites that are going on their 4th year of efficacy, where the birds have, once they find a new nesting place, they don't come back. Does it have glue on the back? No, it doesn't. There's an adhesive that's used. The white lightning is the best way. It's a silicone-based adhesive. And then, of course, you leave it up there. There's a particular treatment plan that you do. You want to leave it up there, but it's a temporary adhesive if you think of it that way. And then once you pull it down, you can do the repair, but you're actually going to, after you do the repair on the house, you want to put more disc back up over the treatment area for 90 days. So there's your basics on how optical gel is used. I'm going to go ahead and give us a chance to take a break now, and we're going to take about 3 minutes and we'll come back here. So we'll take a 3-minute break. If there's any more questions either on this or on the next one when we get started, please just keep them questions coming in the chat box, and we'll see you in just a few minutes. Okay? So let's take a break and I'll see you shortly.